Hello and welcome back to the Code Vein no weapon attacks, no partner, no rifle shots, no parries, no drain attacks, and no weapon technique like gifts run, otherwise known as the gifts only run. If you haven't watched part 1, make sure you go back and watch that first. And if you have and you clicked on this video, that means something brought you back, so why not subscribe? A quick disclaimer before we begin. Yes, I did use a weapon to block, but the rules of the run state no weapon attacks. If you want to do this run without blocking, be my guest, go for it. With that being said, we're going to pick up right after the Queen's Knight boss battle. Please enjoy. Getting to the end of the cathedral, I encountered the successor of the ribcage, a furry's wet dream. This fox? Dog? Abomination is actually fought twice. The first battle was easy. I just had to run behind her where most of the attacks couldn't reach me and avoid the explosion when she teleports to the other side of the room. Using blood sacrifice, I had just enough ichor to take her down. You'd think that, with how simple the first battle was, the second battle wouldn't be that much harder. Yeah, about that. I just wasted that. This is where shit became unreal. In the second battle, the successor of the ribcage gains over 5,000 health, forcing me to use a glass cannon build as any other setup wouldn't allow me to inflict enough damage before I ran out of ichor. Due to this, some attacks became one-shots, others took out large chunks of my health, and all of the attacks were bullshit. First off, when you enter the room for phase 2, this furry fuck uses an ass-blasting amygdala laser. However, unlike in Bloodborne, the laser itself one-shots me, and if that weren't bad enough, the explosions are also one-shot. Hey, take a look at this pillar. It's a nice pillar, right? See how the laser doesn't go through the pillar? So then you would assume that the explosions would also not go through the pillar, right? Yes! In fact, you'd be correct. Except you're not, you dumb, stupid, idiot fuck. These explosions do whatever the fuck they want. You hid behind this pillar? Too bad, because the laser hit the wall behind you, and now it's ass blasting time. Even when I did successfully hide behind the pillar, the animation is so shit that I always felt like I should have died anyway. The first time she uses this attack is exploitable though, as I was able to force it to take the same route each time and get a few hits in. The next item on this heaping order of bullshit were these purple orbs that last way too long. I would get so distracted trying to run away from these things that I would run right into another attack. Speaking of another attacks, she also had Macaroni Laser Me Daddy-Oli, Spicy MLB Curveballs, Spicier MLB Fastballs, a lightning laser beam that actually is very easily exploitable, but she never fucking uses it, icicles that curve around the pillars. Wait, pillars? What if I could just find the perfect spot behind a pillar and hide there in safety? I mean, the boss doesn't move, right? Surely there's a shut the fuck up. You really think this part of the script would be this long if it were that easy? Oh yeah, hide behind the pillar. Yeah, they must be there for a reason. You know, I too was so naive as to believe that there was any hope with a strategy like that. No, I can't simply just hide behind the pillar because we have even more attacks. 3 balls of ice that, in addition to stun locking me, in addition to one-shotting me if they all hit, can change course after I dodge them and hit me from behind. An underground ichor blast and a barrage of underground lightning bolts that the pillars can do nothing about, forcing me to leave my safety barrier. Because a lot of the attacks are active for an extended period of time, she could actually stack them on top of each other, especially the underground ones. Oh, and that thing I said about the boss not moving? Yeah, it actually gradually slides forward to the point that this AoE will start going through the pillar. So, although I needed the pillars to block half of the attacks, they aren't the panacea to this scourge. What if I just hugged close to the boss and stayed behind it? I mean, sure, on top of the underground attacks she does, she can also do a thunder cross split toe attack that almost one-shots me, and she spins like a fucking Beyblade. But is there any chance there? Sadly, no, because she has one last attack that is worse than all of the others. When you get close to the successor of the ribcage in the second battle, she will explode and teleport to the other end of the arena, just like in the first battle. The explosion was pretty easy to dodge, but that's not the problem here. The problem was that she becomes encapsulated by a shield that nullifies all damage that I can inflict. This shield was the reason why this boss could not be defeated easily. Normally, you're supposed to do a drain attack on the shield to swiftly get rid of it, but of course, I couldn't do that. I could only waste ichor and shoot it with gifts. I discovered that it takes 17 hits to destroy the shield, which is a lot of ichor. While I was able to lower the Ichor cost by using gifts that shoot multiple projectiles, it still consumed 20 Ichor total. Not only that, trying to destroy the shield was like going through a bullet hell. I was desperately trying to use blood sacrifice to regain Ichor as well as regeneration to heal while dodging an onslaught of attacks, shooting her during the few openings I had. It took me many attempts, but I finally destroyed the shield, only for her to teleport to the other side with another one. Because of how much Ichor I had to spend destroying the shield, this strategy simply was not feasible. Another strategy that was quickly abandoned focused on using the gift Final Journey, which restored my health and gave me numerous buffs at the cost of ending my life 60 seconds later. Unexpectedly, it didn't restore Ichor like I thought it would, so it wasn't useful. After a predictably fruitless attempt to kill the boss with Venom, the strategy became hiding behind this pillar and dodging endless attacks, firing off 1 or 2 shots every minute or so. It was agonizing. Each attempt took so long and I was always in imminent danger. I couldn't even just peek out and shoot the boss because all of my attacks had such a disgustingly short range, forcing me to move closer to damage it. As with most bosses, the main problem was having enough Ichor to actually beat her. But it was way worse in this battle because most of the attacks couldn't be blocked, meaning I couldn't guard drain and I would have to depend entirely on blood sacrifices and Ichor concentrate. I alleviated this somewhat by mastering a gift called Cleansing Light, which allowed 75% of the damage done to me to be regenerated, even if it was self-inflicted by a gift like Blood Sacrifice. This not only gave me enough Ichor to work with, but also healed most of the damage I incurred from attacks that weren't one-shots. But because of how the gift worked, I had to pay extra attention to when my health was done regenerating before doing another Blood Sacrifice in order to get the maximum effect, which was already difficult when trying to manage my stamina and Ichor in this chaotic bullet hell. I also grinded to the level cap and upgraded my equipment as far as I could, but this boss still obliterated me. After many hours, I finally started getting to phase 2. Oh, did I forget to mention that there's a phase 2? Yeah, there's a phase 2. Of course there's a phase 2, because this isn't real life. I'm actually in Cocytus. I'm in the 9th circle of hell. I'm in Satan's fucking mouth getting chewed on for creating these godforsaken runs. Of course there's a phase 2. You ever play Halo 3? Remember those kill balls that could spawn into your custom forge level? Well, they're back, baby, sliding across the ground at breakneck speeds and stunning my ass out of existence. During Phase 2, no spot in the arena was safe for more than a few seconds, and it really did feel like I was playing a Dark Souls Toho crossover. This boss was absolutely insane. It had more moves than most of the bosses I fought in other games, and could stack them on top of each other, which, when most of them were one-shots, was traumatizing. However, after 8 hours and over 140 attempts...
I don't know what she's doing. Oh. Yes. Keep doing whatever this stupid shit is. This is excellent. Oh, this is so good. Unless she one-shots me. Shit. Let me, please let me do this. Please let me do this. Oh my gosh.
I think this is one of the most difficult boss battles I have ever done, period. The only thing that may match it was the Asylum Gwyn, but I just cheesed him in the end. During the fights with the successor of the Ribcage, I was firing on all cylinders, playing with maximum effort, maximum brain power, and even with that, I only won because of a lucky situation and fast thinking. I almost started crying after this battle. It took 2 full streams to beat it. Anyway, upon incepting the boss's memory sea urchin, my lazy stay-at-home teammates and I learned that the queen, whom I killed in my dramatic flashback, had her body divided and implanted in different people, most of whom went berserk and turned into the beastly successors. As I had feared, the queen's weeaboo blood flowed strongly through my veins, and it was up to me to use my Animu powers to save the successors. As much as I never wanted to see that furry foot fetish incarnate again, I restored Aurora, said hello to Big Boob Catatonic Waifu, waved my rifle menacingly at Jack, and proceeded to the next boss, the successor of the Breath. In what I saw as an act of divine mercy, I was able to first try this boss with very little effort. All of his moves were clearly telegraphed and easily dodgeable, and with my new strat using Cleansing Light with Blood Sacrifice, I had more than enough Ichor to take him down. After Full Metal alchemisting Nicola into a lifeless cold metal body that will never be able to feel the warmth of another human, I culturally appropriated his outfit and moved to the next boss, the Gilded Hunter. This was another very easy boss battle as he had little health and all of his attacks were blockable with the exception of this jump attack, which could be dodged normally, and these balls of ichor he launches in Phase 2, which I dodged with Shifting Hollow. While he does buff himself in Phase 2, I was still able to block most of his attacks, and even when he hit me off my feet, I actually didn't take any damage. I just blocked and dodged until he was done throwing his tantrum and then punished him while he was recovering. Upon defeating him, I entered his memory, which revealed that a dark, very bad, no good, edgy man named Mito was responsible for turning Yakumo's waifu into a living fursuit, and that was so not cash money. Traveling through Crisis City, I was blasted by lava urchins for about an hour before I eventually got to the BDSM Neko herself, the successor of the Claw. Initially, I was really worried about having to deal with a burn debuff since, fire, but it turns out that doesn't actually exist, and this boss was a complete pushover. Every attack in Phase 1 could be blocked effortlessly, and there were plenty of opportunities to get a hit in. Phase 2 was a bit more difficult as she gained a dash attack that could one-shot me, but I quickly learned to Shifting Hollow out of it, which was also what I did for these Caltrops. Again, not much to talk about here, it only took me about 3 attempts.
Come on, Yakumo. We like.
The next location was the Crown of Sand, the only area other than the cathedral that gave me a bit of trouble. Most of it is covered in sand that drains ichor in addition to slowing you down, which was a problem because the enemies here were pretty tough. Still, it didn't take me too long to reach the successor of the Throat. Thankfully, the sand here doesn't drain my ichor, but Deep Throat can by inflicting a debuff called Leak. Just like the other bosses, it was able to do this in 1 or 2 hits regardless of blocking, and because it took away my ability to fight, I mainly focused on not getting hit. For Phase 1, this was relatively simple since keeping my distance limited her to only 2 attacks. One was just a blast of sand and it was very easy to dodge, while the other was an ass clap by her 2 sandy hands, which was very difficult to dodge. I only had 1 effective move against her at this point, but I was able to deal some extra damage through a gift called Merciless Reaper, which allowed me to bypass a huge portion of physical defenses. Regardless of what Fextra Wiki tells you, Merciless Reaper does work with gifts, and due to an oversight, it works even better than intended. The buff is normally meant to act as a one-time damage boost, deactivating after you swing your weapon. However, since I never used a weapon, the buff never deactivated until I died, meaning I now had a permanent buff for a very low ichor cost. After cursing my capture card repeatedly, I started getting to Phase 2, during which she gains a number of ranged sand attacks that cover the entire area. To be completely honest, I never figured out how most of them worked and just frantically used Shifting Hollow whenever I got scared. I eventually defeated her, and Big Titty Emo Scargirl rewarded me with one of the most powerful blood codes in the run, Harmonia, which boosted many of my favorite gifts. Having saved the last member of my complacent party, it was now time to face what I thought would be the most difficult boss fight in the game. Imagine Ornstein and Shmoe from Dark Souls, but now Shmoe's titties are on an icy Ornstein and Shmoe fused with a fiery Bane. In the face of this daunting battle, I needed some motivation. I knew it was time to finally reveal who was hidden under the gift box. That's right, motherfuckers, it's Gwyn, Magical Girl Edition. I combined 2 of the things I hate most into a character that I honestly started to like. After scarring the chat's minds with Gwyn-chan's cringy anime dancing, it was back to the boss fight. The Cannoneer and the Blade Bearer battle is similar to the Ornstein and Shmoe boss fight in that you have to defeat 2 bosses at once. Normally, you'd have a partner and it'd be 2v2, but of course, I had abandoned all social attachments because I'm an alpha gamer. In my opinion, this fight is actually more difficult than Ornstein and Shmoe when it's tackled alone, as there is rarely any breathing room due to the relentless attack patterns. The Cannoneer is rather slow and easy to deal with, provided I had enough stamina to block and dodge his ranged attacks. Since most of his threatening attacks were close range, I kept my distance from him while I dealt with the Blade Bearer, who was a much more lethal threat. She was much quicker and her attacks hit much harder. For example, this sword thrust was able to pierce through walls and near one-shot me, and since it had a really large range, I was always paranoid and constantly had to keep track of her. She could also buff her defense, which rendered my attacks useless, forcing me to run circuits around the arena until it wore off. While it is possible to block most of their attacks, I couldn't really exploit this because the targeting would spin me around and I'd just get hit in the back by the other boss. But all in all, this boss fight wasn't really that difficult at all. After getting one-shot several times, I transformed my Suicide Spur Blood Veil to be fire resistant. Along with the Ice Armor and Flame Protection gift, I was able to survive most attacks, and once I had taken out the Blade Bearer using a Harmonious setup stacked with fire gifts, I switched to an Isis build with ice gifts to defeat the Cannoneer without too much trouble. Before we get into the next boss, you may have noticed some blurs on the screen. This was due to a recording mistake that forced some stream notifications onto the raw footage. But why would I bring attention to that in the narration instead of just addressing it in a footnote? Well, that's because the 100% natural foam core buttress pillow ad is a little too big to be dismissed with a footnote. I'm not going to explain why it's there. I mean, you should watch the stream, man. If you wanted to know, you'd watch the stream. But let me just say that I sure as hell would never buy something that degenerate. In any case, I can't do anything about it, so it's just gonna be there. Immediately following the previous boss fight was Mito, who revealed that he intended to remove the protective mist that acts as a barrier against horrors in order to facilitate natural selection. Like a true advocate of evolutionary accelerationism, he would probably be the first to be killed off by the very natural selection he espouses, since he's just a whiny bitch boy that barely posed a threat. Despite having the ability to inflict the inhibit buff that temporarily prevents me from using gifts, all of his attacks were clearly telegraphed, so I just kept my distance and tried not to get hit at all. When I did get hit, I just used an anti-inhibit item and I was cured. In the beginning of the fight, he would do this edgy Excalibur pole or something, and it would give me enough time to run behind him and fire off enough attacks to clear nearly a quarter of his health before he was able to finish the animation and turn around, which was also what I did when he inevitably got staggered. After glass cannoning the fuck out of him, he started to crumble to ash, but decided that was not cool enough for his cliche anime villain persona, and instead decided to explode. It had now become apparent that I would have to become a vessel for all of the vestiges and be imprisoned in order to save the world. My friends offered their support to me despite having no presence on the battlefield thus far.
We're friends. We'll fight together.
No, we aren't, and no, we won't. In the provisional government outskirts, I spent around an hour fighting this enemy to master some gifts, and once again faced the Queen's Knight, and this time, he's serious. Since I already knew most of his moves, this reskinned fight wasn't that much harder. The only difference being that many of the moves were powered up to one-shots, and in his second phase, he could inflict leak. Just like before, I was able to block most of his attacks, and despite being afflicted with leak, I was able to blood sacrifice my way through the debuff and unreborn the Queen's Knight Reborn. Now we're in the final part of the game. I absolutely obliterated the attendant of the relics in about 10 seconds and defeated the buffed up mini-boss version of the Argent Wolf Berserker using the same foolproof strategy of guarding the entire time. Before we get into the final fights of the game, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Owen Brick, a Code Vein YouTuber who became the database for any questions I had about the game and saved me days of research. If you love Code Vein, check him out and show him some love. Right now, he's trying to get to 100 stars of difficulty, which is absolutely insane. I also wanted to say a huge fuck you to the Fextra's Code Vein wiki. You'd think a Souls game with anime titties would have weebs frothing at the mouths to unveil every single detail and mechanic. But no, instead, I just get question marks under bosses' stats, unfilled templates, and dead links. Without Owen, I would have had to figure out all the shit on my own since the wiki was so inadequate. With that out of the way, let's move on to the final bosses. Gregorio Silva, the dude who was protecting the region from horrors by becoming an air humidifier, had thrown away the last of his humanity and turned into his edgy persona, the Skull King. While I don't see anything resembling a skull, I do see degeneracy, and it must be erased. I fully upgraded my Suicide Spur for maximum glass and leveled myself up to 84. As he was preoccupied with his intro animation, I was able to prepare a massive amount of damage just as he finished. Other than that, there wasn't much strategy in this battle since I was able to block nearly every single attack. He did have one unblockable jump attack, but it was easy enough to dodge, and while his phase 2 was a bit trickier, it wasn't anything I hadn't seen before. I eventually put him down and was now ready to face the true final boss. Because I am a fucking angel and saved all of my friends' significant others despite them doing jack shit for me throughout this campaign, the Virgin Reborn was summoned. This boss took a lot of strategy. The Virgin Reborn has extreme resistances to all forms of elemental damage, which I mistakenly thought I was overcoming with the Merciless Reaper buff. As I mentioned before, it only works on physical resistances, not elemental, but I didn't know that at the time. Because of this, I barely did any damage to the boss, so each attempt was a huge time investment. Though the boss only had 3 attacks I had to worry about in its first phase, it was still quite formidable. The first was a jumping one-shot body slam that just had to be dodged normally. The second was a series of scratch attacks that I could block, but it attacked so frequently and quickly that I would run out of stamina if I wasn't paying attention. The third attack was an Amygdala-style claw blast that was extraordinarily hard to time and had an incredibly long duration of effect. So long that the only way I could reliably avoid it was by using Shifting Hollow when the attack already appeared to have gone through my body. Any later or any earlier resulted in me getting absolutely blasted. This attack was the only real opportunity for me to deal some damage, as all the other attacks recovered far too quickly for me to do anything. There were 2 other attacks the boss could use, a ranged thorn shot and a massive AoE, but because of the close distance I always kept to the boss, they were barely ever used. The most frustrating thing about this boss was that everything except its face had heavily increased defense, and I could never reliably get my attacks in that hitbox even when they seemed perfectly aligned. Sometimes I did extra damage, sometimes I didn't. I never saw any perceivable difference that would predict either outcome. Because the Virgin had equal resistance to all elements and physical damage, I was free to use whatever offensive gifts I wanted, besides sand. Sand still sucked. I also found out that attack boosting gifts like Bridge to Glory and Madness Blow did not affect the gifts I was allowed to use. One gift that was extremely useful was Feral Tenacity, which works kind of like the Sturdy ability in Pokemon, allowing me to survive an attack that would have otherwise killed me. Another change I made to my build was using a gift called Jupiter's Blade, a very fast sweep of lightning that doesn't break the rules since it's not a real physical weapon. As was standard procedure by this point, I used Cleansing Light and Blood Sacrifice when I needed to, but I mostly gained Ichor from blocking the scratch attacks. Even with all these strategic components, it was still hell. Each attempt was an arduous endeavor that consisted of constantly watching stamina while guarding, executing precise dodges where failure meant death, and inflicting tiny bits of damage whenever I could. After perfecting this strategy, I finally started getting to phase 2, and holy shit is it terrifying. It starts out with this storm of Ichor Thorns that all can one-shot me, and even with Feral Tenacity, it felt hopeless. I initially tried to buff myself with every gift I had, but that proved to be futile. Ultimately, I found that if I was able to get as far away as possible when the thorns spawned, I could turn around and successfully block all of them. And after an excruciating battle that lasted nearly 10 minutes, I had unvirgined the Virgin Reborn. Big Boob Fanservice Chan sacrificed herself in my place to become Big Boob Fanservice Tree Chan, the world was saved, and I had successfully beaten Code Vein only using gifts. This run, although not as traumatic as the All Gwyn run, was a lot harder as I actually had to be good at the game and formulate strategies for each boss battle. The game is way more fast-paced than Dark Souls, and the successor of the Ribcage was the most difficult challenge I've faced in a run yet, as even when I was putting my all into the game, I was still struggling. Overall though, most of the bosses were pretty easy after I figured them out, and it was mostly just bullshit slowing me down. If you enjoyed this video, remember to share it, and comment any other challenge run ideas you might have in any other games. Thank you to all of my generous supporters, who were able to reach the donation incentive and force me to return to Code Vein to beat all of the depths and DLC bosses with the same restrictions. Thank you all for getting me one step closer to my dream of one day completing Bloodborne All Orphan of Kos. Until next time, this is Challenger Andy, reminding you to keep your degenerate anime urges in check, and fix the fucking wikis. See ya.